All right, everybody, welcome. We're going to go ahead and 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Go ahead and dive into the roll call.
We have some proxies here, but hopefully we can read them. All right, Alan. Stanford, here. Is that a proxy? Yeah. Great. Burbank. Boyd. Brock. Here. Luzon. Here. Karamanica. Chang. Holly.
Here.
Council.
We had a proxy.
Homo. Here. Doms.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Dutch.
Here.
Dyer. Elias. Ellison. Here. Green. Here. Griffin.
Here.
Hadley.
Here.
Hampton.
Here.
Hart. Hildebrandt.
Here.
Jansen.
Here.
Pazmino. Kazim.
Here.
Han.
Here.
Lee.
Emily.
Right.
Lee.
Maggiano.
Here.
Matthews.
Present.
Mendes. Moon.
Here.
Morales. Ofoe.
Here.
Peralta.
Here.
Perry. Riker.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Ruffin.
Here.
Song.
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
Shelmuth.
Here.
Shin. Siciliano. Swift. Talbot. Bismarck. Webb. Wentz. Yang. Yarborough. Yeah, I see you. I see you. All right, we're good. Thank you.
All right, thank y'all. So minutes have been approved. We'll go ahead and just dive right into our administrator reports. Welcome up, President.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's spring break for schools, and I guess that explains why it's a bit more sparse than normal, but great to see so many of you here, and I'm sure there are some online as well. So just a few things I wanted to go through. First, budget. So, the session just ended, and the USG as a whole is in good shape. So, so most of our things were approved through the process of, there's what the governor puts in the budget, and then the House and Senate discuss, and so on. And the final outcome is pretty good in terms of USG's needs being met. We have the funding formula, so we get money in different ways. So one is for the funding formula based on enrollments. There's also for our building maintenance and operations, which is we usually with the utilities prices going up, that's a critical component. Then there are things like major repairs and rehabilitations. So there are different buckets in which the USG gets money from the state. And so we have been fortunate to have a good session, and our chancellor and our team there, our CFO and others did a really good job in presenting our case on behalf of all of us. So we do have, again, this does not, we haven't received the money yet. The USG gets it, and then the USG allocates it to all 26 institutions. So that's how it works. And but we do have, we would expect on our formula funding, there is some additional money for major repairs, which also hopefully, we'll get a slice of that. And we do have huge maintenance needs. I've talked about, one thing I've realized after coming here is how expensive it is to maintain our buildings and the air conditioning and so on. And that's been kind of, part of the reason of why we need to use those buildings. Any facilities we have, it's an asset. If we have people in them, it's a liability if they're empty. And but it is a major expense for us. And so all good news on that front, and including on our Pafford, $1.8 million for last phase of the project. And so all generally good news at that level. And now we'll see what comes to UWG from the USG, but all good news at this point. Now, another good news that just came in, I think it was yesterday or day before, our College of Education was in US News and World Report, was ranked 7th largest in the nation and 3rd largest in public schools, in all public universities. And this is, so I think in public universities, we were only after Arizona State and Lamar. I was surprised Lamar was that big. But these are the 2 institutions with larger enrollments. But of course, for us in Georgia, it is significant for, this is the college that helps, push our teachers up, better quality teachers across the state, which then leads to better students that come to us. So it kind of, their work is not only affecting things now, but for years to come, it will come back and we'll have better students because of the work done in that college. So I didn't want to make a special mention. And not to mention, to be honest, it's also the revenues. So this is the school, all our growth. I've talked about undergraduate declines and so on. But our graduate programs have done well, and especially the College of Education. So I just wanted to make a special mention of that. Among other things, on our fundraising side, things are going well, on track for the year. We had a gala that was very successful. We raised $250,000 that evening. And so great support from the community. I've said this before, I'm always so impressed with how much the community cares about the University of West Georgia. And so things are good on that front too. And honestly, I was quite concerned with me being interim president. Sometimes people just, hold on, but there's such a strong commitment to the university that people have kept supporting us, including at this gala. So that was great. On the enrollment front, I think I mentioned last time, we're doing well for the spring. And for the fall too, the signs look good. I know many of you have been involved in events happening like Admitted Students Day and others. And it's going well. The number of people that are coming in is much higher than usual. The only caveat is that this year students are also applying more to institutions. So we have about, I think the last number I heard was in Georgia, about 30% more applications, like people sending to different institutions, which of course means our yield is going to be an issue. So please keep supporting us at these events, wherever faculty are requested, because we got to hang on to every student who is showing an interest here, because they are seeing other institutions too. They're like shopping at this point. And that's going to be the big challenge. But that caveat aside, it is good news seeing how things are happening. And again, my focus has been on the undergraduate side. How do we get students who can truly succeed here? You've heard me talk about graduation rates and others. So it's not just about getting students in any form. It's about getting students who can succeed here. And we know students will also succeed more if they get those in-person experiences. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. But so it's also getting the right kind of students who are more likely to succeed here. All right, so what else? So we have, last time I had commented on the survey that you conducted, and I, kind of expressed my disappointment with some things in the survey about not being focused on, what we had in terms of what faculty can do. At the same time, I told you last time that we are looking at all the things that are mentioned there, and I've had discussions with my team on several of those things. So here are a few things, kind of as follow-up on things that we're doing because of the comments we heard in the survey. So one broad point was about, and this you had raised here in this group as well, which is kind of, we need to find out more about why are students leaving us? And I did some, I asked around what have we done, what surveys have we done to follow up. And unfortunately, what happens is once students leave, they don't want to fill our surveys, right? I mean, they don't like us anymore. So they don't want to spend a minute more on finding. Now, the second option is always we can go back to them. And I know we had also, you'd also given suggestions of the kind of questions we could ask. But asking questions is tricky. I'll tell you, I'll put on my marketing hat and I'll tell you about, there's a lot of research on, it's like if you start asking people, hey, when do you think you may buy a car? And you ask one group that and the other group you don't, what happens is just asking the question makes them think about buying a car. And then this group, is more people in that group start buying cars. So the implication is that once you put ideas into people's head, then they start thinking along those lines, even if they were not thinking. So we definitely don't want to ask questions like, hey, is there a reason you would leave or whatever, right? Proactively so that we can take action, because then they'll start thinking about leaving. So we don't want to do that. So what we're proposing is, and I think I've mentioned, we're also working with the National Institute of Student Success to see how we can, like work on retention and so on. But one thing we are planning to do is to have some simple questions, like some open-ended questions, which could be as simple as, hey, we want to find out if UWG is supporting you in your goals as you pursue your degree, right? So we want to put the idea of like, this is what you're doing, this is what you're following through, and we want to make sure you're on track. And ask them simple questions like, what is working well for you? Which I think is also important for us to know. Sometimes we get too focused on the issues that we also need to double down on the positives, and there are plenty. So, what's working well for you that we should do more of, and the other one simply, what's not working for you that we could improve upon. And instead of giving them ideas on, hey, is it financial aid, is it this? Because, you can imagine you talk about financial aid and, who doesn't want more money, right? So we'll keep it open-ended and see what comes up spontaneously. I will tell you though, that kind of given the national data, given the other data that we have here, definitely, financial aid is one big reason. And we know that because there are lots of students who have signed up for classes, and then by the due date, they cannot pay they cannot pay the tuition, right? And we have been working on it, and the numbers, like, and again, this is thanks to our supporters, and I mentioned this at the gala as well. We used to have as much as roughly 1,500 students who would drop at that point, and that number now is something like 300 something. So, because our tuition is very low, right? So we are actually very good at that. But unfortunately, so it's not like the amounts are too big, but at the same time, once you start supporting people, you need external funds, you need grants so that you can, not grants, you need our supporters to give us money that we can use then to give scholarships or help people if they're kind of stuck at that last minute and they're here for the last semester and they don't have the money. So that financial aid component is one big piece, and I would ask all of you, this is a town where it's not, all of you know people around who may be able to support. So please keep talking about the needs, the impact every dollar makes, so that they can keep supporting us, especially on the front of student scholarships, on the front of making sure students don't drop out, because that is the number one challenge for us, which is solvable, right? There are other challenges which are harder to solve, right? If there are mental health issues and so on, we can offer counseling and we can do other things. But financial aid is a very direct way of holding on to more students who are doing well. Keep in mind, many of them come with like a Hope Scholarship, and then the GPA goes down to 2.9 and they no longer have it, right? So these are not students. We don't, if students aren't performing well, that's fine. But we're talking about students who are here, who are doing well, and because the GPA just went down a bit, they no longer have that assistantship. And then they start thinking, like coming back to my survey question, we don't want people even thinking about like, should I stay or should I go? They should stay. It should not be, and I think that's what happens when there's any change, like in their status due to Hope Scholarship, they start thinking, is it worth my time, or should I go and make money, or should I just take a break and then come back? And then they never come back, right? So that's what we've got to avoid, and that's why, again, if you have contacts, we have a great advancement unit. And so if you have contacts, if you feel there is potential someplace, please let us know so that we can follow up. All right, so that was one kind of getting a sense of the students and why they leave. Student employment was a big one, which in your survey many people had mentioned, and that's something I have been. This is very big for me because one, it helps our students, especially those who need the money to keep going, but also it's one great avenue to help build positive memories. It's one great avenue to keep tabs on students if something is going wrong. So it is beneficial in so many ways. And we have been doing well on that front. I was just asking on the numbers because last time someone had mentioned, kind of the dollars per hour and how it's low, but it has gone up over time. Right now it's minimum 12 an hour, minimum 10, and then 12, and then 15. These are the three categories, but I've also asked my team that if there are some exceptional positions which are hard to meet, we can talk about going beyond that as well. So this is something which is big for us. We had some website issues, I think I mentioned here last time, on students not reaching the right place for applying for jobs. We have fixed that already. We also have, so whether it's through our OHR, Office of Human Resources website, or whether it's through Handshake that students use for careers, we want to make sure that students are aware of these opportunities. We also have next week, April 14th, is National Student Employee Week. So if you have student employees, just keep that in mind for next week. I just created a video in which I interviewed a few students who are working here. So we'll post that video on our social media channels as well. So it is a big priority for us. So if you have students, please encourage them to apply for these positions. Kind of related to that, and this also came up in the survey and then in the last meeting here as well, on research, on students who are working on research, and some of it was many of them can't continue through the summer because of limited funding. So we are adding, I talked to our provost to see what we can do. So I think right now the amount for our undergraduate research is, I think it's 105 or something around that thousand. And we'll be adding $10,000 to that so that students who are working, they can continue some of their work in the summer. And I think as the provost will discuss with the deans kind of how that plays out, but we will increase that amount for research. Also for honors scholars, our students have mentors, and again, it connects to research, and we'll be adding $6,000 there as well to kind of create a toolkit to help to further on that agenda of how do we get students more involved in research, more involved in working with their faculty members. What else? There was the survey also talked about a face-to-face, what are we doing for like a face-to-face campaign and so on. I'm sorry, a campaign for face-to-face students instead of remote. So we have been, so first of all, while we have remote students, I want to assure everyone that we will take care of, we are taking care and we will take care of our online students. We don't want to lose any single student. Georgia is still a net exporter in the online space as well, and that's not good news. So we do want the online students, just like we do want the graduate students. At the same time, for face-to-face, we have to get that core group so that we can kind of build that core. And so I've been talking to our marketing firm. We have a marketing firm Crawford that does all the ads that you see for us, and trying to see how we can focus on the in-person experiences so that when you see imagery, when you see it's kind of less about the individuals and more about the place. And, this is what the place has to offer so that it becomes like, hey, if you're here and, we're considering different options for the campaign, but all of it would be in some sense, whether it's labs or whether it is images of athletics or images of something happening in Love Valley and so on. But how we kind of give that sense of these are the experiences, which is our strongest point. I mean, since I came here, from day one, I could see that our biggest point here is providing those experiences here, especially on campus, and how we can highlight those through our marketing. Another point that has come up in both the survey and then in this group was communication on events. And I know that the provost has already added to his weekly newsletter, kind of like our calendar overall and other activities going on so that you're all aware. And I would encourage you, we always have great events going on. I don't know if you saw, this was like, I think a week ago, we had the Lantern Festivals, these hot air balloons and so on in Love Valley. It was very, very nice event and students were having fun. And honestly, I stood in line too until I realized it was too late. So, but they had lots of exciting things happening. That was a good evening. So as events are happening, again, I would encourage you to join as much as possible. And finally, there was kind of, another point on, and I've mentioned this too, like many of our registered student organizations don't have faculty mentors and some clubs and so on. So we have a strong need there. And one thing that has come up is that sometimes there isn't the time to meet given our class schedules and so on. So we do have, so starting the fall, with the revised class schedules, there is going to be, and I think on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 11 to 12 is open for everyone. And so I'm hoping that time can be used for those kinds of meetings so that everyone is free at that time, both faculty and students, and that can be used for, yeah. So coming back to, kind of our remote classes and remote working and so on, I'm sure you saw my email, after we talked about this in my last Senate meeting, but I also followed up with an email because, the chancellor had sent out an email to all presidents regarding, people need to be on campus, right? So that was the theme, and it was consistent with the theme that I've talked about here, that I've talked about with the staff advisory council, because if we are trying to have that energy on campus with our undergraduate students, it has to start with us. It has to be where students come and they see that we have, that I have the support, that there is something going on here, which is attractive because of which I need to be here. And part of it is classes. And on that, I have to thank you because we are seeing a significant shift toward in-person classes for the fall. Last year, it was, in terms of seats, it was about 40% that were remote. For this fall, it's 28%. So thanks to what you're doing, there is a shift. Again, this is at this point, and we want to make sure that we keep, any opportunity you get, please keep advising students to, hey, if you can take an in-person class, there'll be more experiences. Please keep doing that, because we don't want to just have classes and then later on they shift to the online class, right? At least the ones who can make it. Because again, it's in the short run, students will, it's always tempting to stay home, be in your pajamas and take your classes. But I think we all know that in the long run, it's gonna hurt them if they're not engaging with faculty, with others. And honestly, same for us, same for faculty members and staff members. Our purpose and meaning comes from interacting with them. And so the more we interact with them in person, the better it'll be for us in the long run. So classes in person is kind of one aspect of that energy, but it's not just that. It's how do we take, so my broad thinking is this, which is we will try to get more undergraduate students, especially in person, which will elevate the overall energy of the campus. But that's going to take time, right? So that's not going to happen right away. So while we have this kind of limited energy, how can we make sure that we can concentrate it so that we can kind of like putting on a show? It's like when you go to Disneyland, right? So it's like everyone during those hours, they are putting together a show and making sure that you feel that energy. And so one thing I've asked my team to do is to, whether it's student affairs or academic affairs or athletics and others, which is how can we coordinate on these events, and not just coordinate, like even right now, what's happening is people do match calendars and see, hey, what's happening this day, and let's try to avoid this and have something another day. My thing is, if you have limited energy, then let's make sure, like if you have admitted students day, let's make sure everything is happening, that things are happening around, so that when students walk, and we have so many events in which students come on campus, whether it's dual enrollment or anything else, that we have lots of such days. And how can we kind of like put on the show and have all these different activities happening? For instance, I've asked student affairs, can we have more, if students ask for space, can we give them more outdoor space so that others can see it as well? Otherwise, if they're in one, if they're in the campus ballroom and no one else knows, they're having fun, but no one else kind of feels that energy. So how do we make sure these things are happening outdoors? How do we make sure these things are happening, especially on days when we have these visitors whom we're trying to impress with what we have to offer? And a big part of that is in the academic space as well. So John and I had visited our Carroll County School District and the superintendent and others, and they are very happy with our dual enrollment shift, and they want their students to get more opportunities, but they want their students, and right from middle school, they want their students to come in and get those experiences here and see what college looks like. And that's great for them, and that's great for us, because that's what we need too. We need to start early, right from middle school, get them, and I know some of them have been through our science fairs and so on. We've been bringing in students, but those are the opportunities we need. So from an academic standpoint, what can we do to create that energy on campus? It could mean simple things like, just meetings. It could be taking people to their labs and showing this is what it looks like. And lots of that is happening already. I know, for example, Townsend, right? So there are so many events happening there, which kind of are, adding to that energy, and how can we, combine it with the other things going on? Here in this building, we had a speaker talking about the entrepreneurial mindset, and and we had separately, John and I also met that individual separately, and getting in the energy of like, hey, think about businesses, think about what you can do as you move forward. I talked about the science fair, which was very, very successful, and again, a great way to get in high schoolers and middle schoolers and so on. I went to the media day with SCFM, again, a really wonderful event. So we have, and actually have a long list here of different events, many of them I went to, but there is a lot happening in the academic space. And some of it is like these kind of larger events, and some of it is few students, but with big impact. For example, I just saw, I think it was Nick Sterling getting a grant for where undergraduate students can work with a Webb telescope. Now that is phenomenal for an undergraduate student to have that kind of exposure, right? And I heard about, I think it was Nathan Lors going to the National Undergraduate Research Symposium. And those are the kind of experiences which touch few people, but they are experiences where they come back and they can share with others, and that can spread that energy, even though it may just be a few students who have access to it. And to me, those kinds of experiences are wonderful as well. A lot of work that you are doing on our career readiness QEP. So again, thank you for that. I went to one of those events as well, and there were some amazing ideas from across all schools. So this is not, career readiness is not, it's not just like a business school or something. It's every individual, every single department in this, on this campus. And so a lot of work happening on that as well. So all of this to say that things are happening here, things are happening in student affairs, things are happening in our enrollment side and others, but we have to make sure that we can, like I said, how do we get this energy together? It's limited energy at this point, given, fewer undergraduate students, but how can we make sure that the ones who are here can feel this energy? And how can we make sure that as, we try to recruit more students, we can convey that energy, convey that enthusiasm, like I said, for these students from our county. If they come here, how can we expose them to those experiences? And again, none of this is new to you. You are all already doing this thing. The only thing I'm asking for is how can we coordinate better across the different units so that we can time these things, we can have that bigger impact. Because sometimes the energy just gets dissipated. It's happening in different areas. And somebody who's walking in doesn't feel that energy, even though it's happening in small pockets. So how do we bring it together? So that's the whole point. And by the way, this also happens in physical spaces, like, and if you go to East Commons, for example, or for a dining, you feel more of that energy because it's a smaller space. You go to West Commons, it'll be the same food, it'll be the same number of students, but because it's a larger space, you sometimes don't feel it. So how we concentrate space makes a difference to how we feel, right? So if you had this meeting in a 500-room auditorium, it would not be the same meeting. So the idea is, how do we take all the energy? It's not about, I know all of you are working hard and already pushing on these fronts, but how can we keep coordinating so that we can focus that energy, make an impression on students, get more of them here. And then as more students come in, they create their own energy and they will do their own things. We don't have to always guide them, but we first it needs to start with us. So thanks. Let me stop here and see if there are any questions. Yes, please.
I have lots of questions, but I did have one comment, perhaps a suggestion. I work with students making presentations. Two of my students actually went to the NCUR conference in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, the NCUR, yes.
And it just occurred to me that in about a couple of weeks from now, there'll be two undergraduate conferences. They had the core conference that's put together by the University College. And then there will be the Scholars Day conference, which is put together by the undergraduate research. And once those things happen, they're great. They're really, really, really great. Lots of energy, lots of impact for a lot of students. But once it happens, it kind of dissipates. So it just made me think, why don't we dedicate a space where students who are visiting the college are going to go through and are going to see those things. Perhaps we can select the best ones and ask them, hey, can we record your presentation? And have them there for people to see once they come in.
Yeah.
And even if we just simply have those posters lining up in different places, in art club, in social sciences, in different places, I think people will see that there's a lot more going on. It may not be immediately.
No, I mean, I think some of it, like the posters and stuff, I mean, I do agree. Showcasing what has happened helps, and I've seen that in, like, you know, for example, in biology building and so on, right? I see lots of posters, you get curious, you start reading something, you get interested. But what I would also say is, we don't have to wait for it to get over. If you tell our provost, something is happening, we would like to actually go and send that information to our city and county school districts and say, hey, if you have anyone interested, we're having this, right? So we're having this event. Here's where you can register. Because I can tell you, they are hungry for those opportunities, and we are hungry. It's a true win-win. But so if things like those are happening, you know, even if it's a small event, but you feel like, hey, I could take in 3, 4, 5 people. It's not like I expect hundreds of, I mean, I hope they do, but I don't think that's going to happen. If you have an event, then maybe 2, 3, 5 students who show up. Right, so it's not going to be like it changes the texture of the event. But if you have events, we can proactively publicize it in the community and try to get those students in. And after the fact, I don't know if we need a separate space, but around the spaces where you're having, right? I mean, in your buildings, I would definitely encourage more showcasing after the fact as well. So, but no, I mean, I think that's, yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Yes.
Just to kind of elevate that idea though. I mean, I always ask for student volunteers when I have preview day or accepted students day or something, but they're like spectacularly awkward, even though if it's the most outgoing student, all of a sudden some strangers talk to them and they freeze. But if they had like, if there was an area where it was like, here's some of the students from our college that have their posters, they practice that stuff. They, you know, the awkwardness drains away. Sometimes they can display a greater sense of really what's going on.
So you're saying like after they have presented, if we have an event in which we invite these students who have like practice.
Yeah, it could be a little like Gary College Hub, little, you know, or we're mix them together, you know, it's supposed to be.
No, yeah, okay. No, I mean, I think.
7, not a lot.
I think that's something to be considered for events, even these events like Admitted Students Day. I know that faculty are involved, but maybe, you know, some of our bright students have that opportunity as well, and they'll be happy to showcase their work because they've done it already. It's not like they've practiced. I think that's something good to consider as well.
They try to help at the table, and they, even if they're like the most outgoing student, they just freeze. And I'm like, you're like really great. Why aren't you doing right now?
And honestly, that's something, and that is something, again, it's like, you know, some of it is, you know, some of it is again the, you know, kind of COVID happened and like, you know, and so on. But we do need to do more on just that. Doesn't matter what you're studying, on that communication, that confidence to come up and speak and engage in a conversation, answer questions. People challenge you on your ideas, and you have, you know, that kind of a process is critical in any field, right? So, and how do we, I mean, I will say that one thing that, you know, again, the system office started a couple of years ago, we're having the debate camp in this year, which again is a good move in that direction, and we'll have our students compete there as well. And again, that touches only a few students, but I feel like if there are these few students out there doing some amazing things, and then they come back and you know, and help others get to that level. But no, I agree with you. Right? And we'll keep that in mind. Other comments, questions? Nothing else? All right. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy spring. Hope you made it through the winds last night. Well, but I'd like to start off by echoing Ashwani's comments about, thanks and congratulations for all the great things that are going on. This spring, we have been incredibly active in Kerr Scholars Day. I love the idea of capturing those posters, whether it's conversations and letting the awkwardness drip away because we've got something to talk about. But people like seeing their name on an academic poster, right? At least I did back in the day. So capturing those after Scholars Day or after Incur and putting them around the buildings, I think is a grand idea. Not only is the student going to feel proud and be able to show that off, but then prospective students walking around could say, oh, this is the activity that we have going on. We can tell those stories and we can schedule, but just creating an atmosphere. And I'll use the posters along the wall as a metaphor. We've had, I think we counted 288 different events that occurred just this spring semester that we either hosted or the RSOs and other things going around. Just a tremendous amount of activity. And so, yes, Carol and Carrollton, it's spring break this week, but there's still energy. And, the storms last night weren't the only energy. We've got this all across campus. I'm going to quote a business that we visited last week who said, we would hire every one of your graduates if we could, meaning that they're hungry for what UWG is producing. And that's not just that one academic area. That's truly, businesses are saying this when we talk with them. Our challenge is, how do we keep pace? And so a couple of things I'd like to talk about today, really about capacity. And the president just mentioned energy on campus on Fridays, overall increase in the number of seats that we're scheduling for that on-campus presence and really leaning into that. But one of the biggest pathways for that is our dual enrollment and our Go West Early. And how do we convert those students? I think they have an amazing experience. And for many of our students that get a taste of UWG, whether that's in a preview day or through dual enrollment, we have a pretty high conversion rate. But one of the things that might be lacking in that dual enrollment experience is getting all of campus, getting more than just the academic course. And so what you'll see, we're programming intentionally Monday, Wednesday, Friday courses and increasing the activities that we offer on Fridays. In the mornings for those dual enrollment students, really for all students, but also on Friday afternoons, working with student affairs to do more event programming and keeping that energy that the president just talked about. But one of the other things we'd like to do is make sure that those dual enrollment students are able to come and visit you in your particular areas, your labs, your classrooms, your buildings. Not, the old tours around campus used to drive students around and say, well, this is the nursing building and this is Pafford and this is humanities. And that's nice, that's level one. But once we go in, once they see these posters, once they talk with faculty, once they engage and say, here are the experiences that you get when you come to UWG, that takes it to a deeper level. And I think that our conversion rate is going to be higher when we start incorporating that. This is a direct outcome from a conversation in Provost Council that said, how can we be more engaged in that recruitment process appropriately, right? That's SEM, and we're not asking everybody to do everybody's job. But when a student is interested in a particular discipline, talking with a faculty member in that area is probably the biggest influential factor that's going to get them to come to UWG and study with that professor. So you'll be seeing invitations and participating in those increasingly in the upcoming academic year. Our best experience is that work with you. And as we've talked about our QEP and experiential learning and undergraduate research, Incur, Scholars Day, these are the things that are really, that embody the Why Go West. This is one of the things that we excel in, whether it's the access to, just reset the telescope. The James Webb, thank you. Who gets access as an undergraduate to the Webb telescope? That's phenomenal. And that's just one example that we repeat over and over and over again in each of our academic areas. So if you have ideas on that, please reach out to me, your chair, your dean, to say, here's what we could be showcasing. And we'd love to put that front and center as students are visiting campus. Along the same lines, if you look at the Board of Regents agenda that was just published today for next week, there are two items I'd like to draw to your attention to. One is this TCSG and USG articulation. They're expanding. We have an existing articulation And David's nodding, he's like, yep, we've got a lot of these. Where students can take Gen Ed or Core Impacts courses, and then we want them to take that AAS or that AA degree and come to UWG, increasing that pipeline. And we're expanding the Gen Ed courses that are available. So COM 1101 or 1100 is on that, some Spanish courses, expanded in English. We've got a stronger partnership with TCSG and USG in that. The other is AI policy, adding a 6.28. And I point both of these out because we're doing good work in connecting with West Georgia Technical College. We're looking at more pathways in business, in computing, and the third is, it's escaping my mind for just a moment, healthcare, I believe, nursing pathways, and creating more ways where those students can come to us. So not just relying on dual enrollment or first-time, full-time out of high school, but really creating and opening the doors wide for achieving that undergraduate enrollment focus that we're looking at. But that AI policy, I point out, is because we are, I would say, ahead of the curve in that. We've had AI Busters, which Jeff helped me, was it earlier this week or last week? We had our third installment.
Yeah, just Thursday.
Okay, of our, well, yesterday.
Yeah.
It feels like a week, right? 'Tis this time of year as we're finishing up the semester. But not only are we hosting these, we've had good policy discussions and updating our syllabus template to incorporate these elements in. So if and when that's adopted next week, I'm confident that we can graft that in, and UWG is going to be fully compliant with that out of the gate. If you have more ideas, now that you've had more exposure to AI and you're seeing it being used in the classroom or you're utilizing that, I encourage you to continue to connect with the AI Buster, with IFE, and reach out to me. I'm happy to hear about lessons, best practices, and make sure that we diffuse that across the institution. We've got a couple of things. Appreciate Dylan forwarding to me that are at the top of your mind. I'd like to address those, and we can dive deeper into them during our discussion. One is the renovation of Pafford, which you heard the president mention. Phase 3 funding looks like it's headed in the right direction there. We're going to make sure that people are well taken care of in that, working with facilities. So double down with Karen. You've given me some homework to follow up to make sure that that plan of any faculty member in Pafford, whether that's boxing, what's the new temporary location, and then the move back once that renovation is complete, is well taken care of. The other item raised, two other items, this idea of implementing the principal lecturer rank at UWG. You've got lecturer, senior lecturer, and principal lecturer. That occurs at other USG institutions. Happy to coordinate with the system office and for the Faculty Affairs Committee, if you want to take that on and have that discussion, we can coordinate with the system office on that. And then the final item that came up and was raised to discuss, I know it's on the agenda, is this idea of shifting from a calendar year to an academic year cycle for our annual reviews. Great minds think alike. This came up in our Regents Advisory Council for Academic Affairs meeting earlier this semester. There were a number of provosts that wanted to take this on as a topic to align the annual review with the workload that we do in an academic year. It seems like there's a mismatch with why do we get reviewed on a calendar year? If I'm defining my workload, it's kind of bisected by the summer. So why are we doing it? I think the best answer any of the provosts could come up with is there's a policy on merit raises at the state level that requires an annual review be done in that year where merit raises occur. And so that's why you complete the annual review early in the calendar year for the past, and then when merit raises are implemented, we're in a good position to affect those across faculty. I think that there's a way forward we can ensure we're in compliance with that and make sure we have the ability to apply them if and when they're awarded, but also at the same time aligning that review cycle with the academic year. So welcome that conversation later today, but you're in good company in raising that because there are, I think, a number of USG institutions that are addressing that across the state. Last thing I want to raise, and then happy to dive into anything that you all have questions. This idea of student success came up in our last few faculty senate meetings about, how do we make sure we're holding on to students. The president just mentioned a number of those, but I do want to commend you that we did a lot of work to comply with the new USG standard of student success. And UWG, I think, wisely embedded that across all of the other dimensions of our workload in teaching, in scholarship, and in service. And so I'll point you back to that faculty handbook policy that we updated, where it enumerates a number of examples where faculty are contributing to student success. These are the evidentiary materials that you might consider as you're showing that you are contributing to student success. And if we kind of wrap a bow around some of the conversations we've had here about student retention, about attracting students into our majors, many of the things that you all articulated as exemplars for that process are right there. So, hosting preview day, writing letters for students that you mentor to help them get into graduate school at great institutions. Faculty are very engaged in that. And if you look at these annual reviews, I think you'll see that very clearly evidenced. The challenge we have is, as the president indicated, the energy, capturing that, not just dissipated across a pretty wide array of academic programs, but how do we condense that in a way where it's very evident and at the forefront, especially on campus as prospective students are visiting. So posters on the wall, making sure your CVs and your websites are updated, not just individually, but at an academic program level. I'll share, when my family was looking for our youngest of where he wanted to go to school, we visited one place in the USG that had a great poster about physics, which was his intended area, but it was a poster from 1982. And I know this place has done work in this area in the last 40 years, but it gave the impression that, they're 40 years old. That wasn't the case, right? It's a world-class location, a world-class program. In the same way, we're doing world-class work. And so if you go to your program's website and the latest article is from a year or two ago, please raise your hand, let me know, let your chair, let your dean know, hey, we've got these great things. UCM just wrote up this article. We need a link to it rather than this thing that happened 2 years ago. That currency is really important. And if we crowdsource this, I think it'll make sure that the work that you all are doing, the phenomenal work that you all are doing, we make sure is front and center along the way. So last item, make sure the general faculty meeting is on your calendar. That'll be May 2nd. I think, 3 weeks? Maybe 4? 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today. Look forward to having that and recognizing all of the promotion and tenure activities that have occurred in this academic year, celebrating our colleagues, and then doing the formal business of the faculty led by the Faculty Senate. With that, happy to take any questions or if you have comments, please. Yes.
So this is about humanities. First, I really want to compliment and say that UWG's ITS and Navy have been, that staff has been amazing. Actually working around what the contractors haven't done. But the big question is, as the semester comes to a close, what steps and actions are being taken to address and fix all problems in humanities? Technology doesn't work, incorrect furniture, things of that nature. So what are the steps and the actions that are going to be taken? Because when we look at this, this actually impacts the quality of learning experiences we can provide, as well as student engagement and student learning.
Yeah, so there's two sides to this. One, I experienced this myself a few weeks ago when I attended Laura's class, and we had a wheeled TV in the room rather than the two Epson printers, the two projectors that were in the ceiling. Right, I go way back.
Yeah.
Used to printer company. So that is a problem, and as facilities has explained it to me, you're right. IT has done a great job kind of filling in the gap. Anything that's not that Crestron system, they're able to touch and to help with. The challenge is, and this is really a facilities question. I spoke with Jeremy earlier this week and asked for an update on this. The contractor for that building needs to fulfill that contract. And I know that doesn't help us in the day-to-day, but it's really beyond the scope of AA to be, I don't want to get into the gory details of it. It's way more messy than any of us should have to know about, but it is being actively pursued by facilities. And I share your lament that it is not what it should be. On the other side, that building has evolved considerably in the 7 years, I think, since it was originally conceived as a project. The needs have changed. And some of the things that people thought were going to be purchased in the original conversations either fell off from a value engineering perspective or just because it's a 7-year long process. I'm told earlier this week that there are some commitments for what people needed and expected to be purchased, but were not in the coming summer. So I'm happy to follow up. I mean, Clint should have the latest details on that. So let's talk local. But if he can't give you updates on both of those elements specifically for the impacted faculty and the programs, then please reach out to me and I'll redouble my my work with facilities to get you that info. I will also point out that we've implemented that WIC ticketing system. And you manage a lot of little things that based on the dashboard that I saw late last week, I think the vast majority of those have been solved, but the technology, which is really front and center, is the thorn in our side.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Yeah, I wish I had better news.
Yeah.
One of the issues with WIC too is if they're not allowed to touch it, they'll put it in as resolved. Even if it's not resolved, they'll just respond that it's resolved because they can't do anything about it. So may or may not be a good picture of what's happening there because things are labeled as resolved, even though they're not, just because they can't touch them. Right. So that's been some of our frustration too, is that we'll send things into WIC that we need fixed and they're not allowed to touch them because it's contractors. So they just say it's resolved, yeah. Which it's not.
Right.
So I think, yes, I think ITS, WIC, they're doing all they can. We're just, I think, stuck between a rock and a hard place trying to make it work. But it's been very frustrating if you were expecting to come into a class and be able to project music and listen to music and you end up having a class huddle around your laptop to try and teach something. And that's frustrating for the students too, because there's this huge new beautiful building that we have. It's beautiful and we're thankful for what has been done there, because what we had before, I mean, it's so updated. But I think it's a shared frustration between art and music that things just haven't really changed since August. Like we've just been waiting to see. And so, I mean, anything that can be done, we appreciate you getting involved and coming and hearing our frustrations and meeting with us, but to get the contractor to finish it out, especially since we're looking at another renovation, that makes me nervous that humanities will then be forgotten because there's another renovation.
It will not be forgotten. I wake up with this, you know, there's a lot of back of the house that I really can't get into for fear of putting it even further behind, but it is actively being pursued. And I'll also share, yes, computing, but to me, the simplest tech is what is more reliable. So in my conversation with Clint, if you all have, this may or may not solve it, but if it's Apple TVs and Roku sticks that you can just pitch to wirelessly off of your laptop, that might be something that at least gets us better than funneling around a laptop. And you know, world-class programs, we're just talking about that, but that's an amateur hour, right? And it's really hurting our ability with the students that we've got. And then word of mouth, right? That's the best marketing you can have. So I had this great experience at UWG. I was able to do these things. And then when tech and the building gets in our way, that's a problem. So I'm dedicated to that as is Clint, as is Jeremy.
I will, an example is our building, it has high traffic with middle school and high school students coming in for events and things like that. And well, you know, honestly, we really appreciate it. We've been doing all this out. ITS and AV, Blake's crew, they've been awesome. So thank you so much.
If you have ideas, again, to me, an Apple TV is $100. You plug it in, and if you have an Apple device, you can just pitch to it wirelessly. Sometimes AV, well, I mean, we're dealing with this restaurant system, way too complicated for what we need to be able to pull off. So if you do see low-tech solutions that you believe will work, I've messaged to Clint, I've messaged to Kirk, we can do that as a stopgap. Other thoughts, questions? Thank you.
All right, folks. So just in the context of general information in no particular order here, I think the first place I want to start is because it's our last meeting of the year. I just want to take a big picture view over what we've done this past year, and I think it's been a big one. The first place I want to start is to thank everybody for everything that you are all doing on a regular basis, for your colleagues, for our students, and especially in this context, being here and representing your colleagues, really, really appreciate it. We heard from our president today, from our provost today, recognition for all of the many things that we're doing, and I think that's just really valuable. So for me, I just throw myself in there. Thank you so much. I think we've really started some really positive transitions this year. I hope we can continue that momentum. I think we've addressed some challenges. And in the context of thinking through those challenges, we know that there's still some work to do, but we also need to acknowledge that there has been some progress. From my observations from our perspective as faculty, I think we've begun to do a much better job at being willing to engage constructively with our leaders by providing both positive and, when necessary, negative feedback. And I hope we can really build on that and continue that. It's incredibly important to be able to have that constructive conversation and deliver that on the ground perspective. I hope to continue on that. From the perspective of our leaders, I think them being here every month and engaging with us is invaluable. And I hope y'all join me in just expressing appreciation for that. I think that is, that's not something that necessarily has to happen. It happens because we value it and they find value in it, and it benefits the entire institution. So that's great. And I think we can build on that. And I also want to acknowledge, because one of our challenges this year that we dealt with was having some conversations with our provost about challenges. So I also want to share that there has been much greater positivity on that front from my perspective. And I don't think I'm alone on that. And I know I'm not alone on that, because several of you have come to me with stories to convey, like, hey, I think you should publicly share this particular story or that particular way that the provost has directly interacted positively with our colleagues. So I think this is very important to show, like I said, convey the positive and the negative. So I want to do that, and I hope we can all continue to move in that positive direction. So on that front, next item on the agenda that I want to update you on is, I know there's a lot of questions about the presidential search. Unfortunately, there's very little that I can actually say on that, but I do think it's important to say what I can. So what I can say is, and I hope this speaks for itself, we are very, very, very busy this month. It is an extremely busy month. I told you last month that the chancellor conveyed a goal to be able to have this whole thing wrapped up by the summer. So I'm fairly confident, I'm very confident that, at least as far as us as a committee doing our part, that we will be able to enable the chancellor to meet that goal. I just want to remind everybody that our role as a committee is to convey 3 to 5 unranked candidates to the chancellor and the board for them to make the final decision. And that is what we're working on actively. And I think we have a very strong pool. That pool reflects the priorities that you all articulated that were largely reflected in that profile. So I think this is something we should all be excited about. The other big thing I wanted, before we move to the agenda, I just wanted to remind everybody about, we need a chair-elect for this body. So I still have another year on my term. The way it by policy should work is we have a chair-elect elected in a few weeks around our general faculty meeting. And that chair-elect will serve as chair-elect for a year to learn the role, and then we'll take over 1 year from now. We do have a nominee for that position. We need 2 nominees, though, to have an election. So in order to qualify for the ballot, you have to be a tenured professor and you have to have served on the Senate within the past 3 years. So that many of you in this room would qualify, and many of your colleagues would qualify. So please know we're halfway there. We have a nominee who I think would be great, and we're just going to sit on that for just a minute because we need 2 nominees before we can have an election. Okay, so please pound the pavement, and you can nominate yourself. You can also nominate someone else. Any questions on anything that I've conveyed before we move to the agenda? All right, so the first item on here, I do want to talk about this bit with gauging interest on transitioning. So this came out of a conversation in Provost Council, which, by the way, related to something I just mentioned, Provost Council has been dramatically reinvigorated this past year, and that's one of the ways that I feel strongly that the provost is really engaging constructively. A really great conversation that we had in Provost Council was about can we rethink how we do our annual reviews and tie them to the academic calendar rather than the calendar. So as far as we're concerned, that would involve us having to change some policies. So we do have a role. There are some things in the faculty handbook that we would have to address in order to make that happen. We don't have time left in this academic year to make that happen. But because the provost office will have to make some movement on it, because we'd have to make some movement on it, we just wanted to take a chance to gauge interest. So if anybody wants to make a comment on that, say, hey, great idea, horrible idea, just to give us a sense of how we should be thinking about setting things up for hitting the ground in the fall. I kind of want to take a straw poll, but I'm not sure that the parliamentarian was thrilled with that idea. So. Nonetheless, we can have some hall conversation. That's looking like it will be an agenda item for the fall. Working with either our faculty affairs committee, if that passes the general faculty vote, or the faculty development committee, working through those details and how to make that transition. Everything I've heard from our colleagues, it sounds like in principle, this is something we support, but the devil's in the details. The provost already talked about the merit issues, trying to work through some of that. The devil's in the details, but in general, it seems like this is how we all think anyways.
Staff go to here.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think that's outside of our purview.
I think the policy is that staff must be evaluated annually, whether that's an academic or an annual calendar. We can coordinate with HR on that.
Am I wrong that we used to be on the academic calendar for evals? At least our college can, right? We're not. Yeah.
Vague memory that we did. I mean, I'm sure if I go look back at my.
I thought I was crazy here. I was like, we used to be on an academic calendar.
I was thinking the same thing.
We did.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
Yeah. See, I think then the staff never was. Staff has always been, I think, on that, on that calendar view. And so that was, I think that might have been why they changed it. Was one of the reasons to align us with the staff period. But my memory could be wrong.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
I think there was some. Yeah.
I say we go for it.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
I think it's worth exploring. I was in an institution that did it academic year and they were able to align it with their merit pay. And, I think it makes sense. I think it's, if we figure out it works, why not? If we figure out it's a bad idea, we figure out it's a bad idea.
Yeah. So.
But if I memory serves right, I mean, I think the change happened right around the time when we had, what do you call it, not the merit race, but that was also part of what happened. But when we had the improvements in our salaries, that salary study, or sometime around that period of time, I think is when it happened.
Salary.
But yeah, the salary compression study, and then eventually that decision was made, and he needed to be decided or something along.
Yeah.
But the one reason that I think would be, and this is me thinking back to when I was chair of the department, that's one of the most difficult times of the year as a chair. And so, especially because it's the beginning of the semester, so many things are happening. So from the chair's perspective, thinking back to what I did then, it would make a lot more sense to do it in summer, obviously for everybody to submit their evaluations at the end of the spring, so that the chairs can then have a good chunk of the summer to do it, because it's when there's a bit of downtime. I think logistically, from a chair's perspective, it would make perfect sense.
Yeah.
And then if you have to do annual evaluations for staff at the halfway, in December, then you're only doing half the work. And especially now that you have bigger departments with more staff, I think it would make probably better sense for those leaders to do that work in that order.
Yeah.
But this is me just thinking back to how it was then.
Yeah. Just to further report out a little bit on what I heard in provost councils, a lot of that came up with that chairs, schools have gotten bigger. And so when chairs have to write all these things, it would be easier for them to do that after the semester has kind of wound down a little bit. So that was definitely up there. But Katie, you had some.
Yeah. Also fiscal lineup. I mean, our fiscal calendar is July 1st to June 30th.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I think staff just changed in the last couple of years to a fiscal year evaluation.
Okay. I think I'm hearing the same thing that we talked about in executive, same kind of thing we heard in provost council. Is devil's in the details, but there is general support. This needs to be high on the agenda for when we get back together. Good. All right, good. All right, thank you. So we do have more on this agenda. So let's go ahead and move on and dive into the UPC items.
So UPC submitted 12 action items for consideration today, and we received no questions by minutes of. If anybody has any questions, we'll take those now. Okay, so I guess we're ready then for the vote. So all in favor of the action items submitted by UPC, if you'll raise your hand. And any opposed or any abstaining? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Down to GPC.
UPC actually had an information item, which was the completion of 4 comprehensive program reviews for graduate programs. Additionally, GPC had 5 action items for approval. As far as I know, there were no questions received in advance. Are there any questions? I would not like to call it to a vote. All in favor of the 5 action items? Any opposed? Any abstain?
Thank you. Faculty development. Amy.
Right. Today we have for a vote the faculty emeritus policy, but before we do, I'd like to have a friendly amendment if someone could to correct a typo. So I'll offer the amendment. Yes, I believe I can. And the amendment is to remove the word personal and replace it with personnel. It's all personal. But there we go. If we could do that, that would be lovely.
So we'll need a second
or a second. Thank you. Really appreciate that.
And then you'll take a vote of everyone in favor. Right.
And there we go.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin, very much. Okay, and so call for discussion. Yes, is there any discussion on this policy? A month ago, we sent it out for everyone to take a look at it through you. I've got some great feedback. We incorporated it. It's all there. So yes, that's it.
Was there still scholarship?
No, I believe that was the main that we know. We all agree that that was not necessary. Done your bit for king and country. So
Rest.
Good.
so I call the vote.
It's good. Call.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you all very much.
Okay. So next up would be the rules committee. So Marion's here for Gavin.
All right, the First, that we have a generative artificial intelligence syllabus policy. And yeah, it's up there. So the Rules Committee was charged with creating a generative artificial intelligence or AI policy for the UWG faculty handbook. Institute for Faculty Excellence, which is linked in here to the page, provides 4 policy options for instructors. Keeping that resource in mind, so the 4 options in mind, the Rules Committee simply proposes the attached modification. This was just a brief modification to the existing policy in the handbook 201.01, which clearly states everything that should be in the syllabus. So right there, yeah, so it just adds on and the instructor's policy on student use of generative artificial.
Have any questions or comments or discussion? Call the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All in favor?
So all in favor?
Abstain? All right. Done.
All right. The second item is the office hour policy. The Rules Committee was charged with revisiting the office hours policy in the faculty handbook to increase faculty student engagement. The committee proposes that each academic unit establishes an office hour policy, which faculty may use to guide their decisions regarding their office hour scheduling and modalities. The requirements of such policies are not being proposed at this time. Further, the committee is not defining academic unit. The faculty unit will be synonymous with program or your lowest level of organization. Exceptions will apply for different organizational structures on campus. The Rules Committee is proposing an attached modification in red to the faculty handbook section 208. And I'm aware that there are questions from so. Questions.
Open for questions and discussions.
Yeah.
To have like an equitable policy across the units, like so many hours per credit hour taught, or is it just up to each unit to decide how many hours and if those hours include the part line and the first unit?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I would imagine that a lot of that falls down to administrators, because that's sort of the process of policy and how it's accepted on campus, but I might accept a little intervention from you because of
I'm happy to weigh in that, you know, that's a local decision. It's really based on what's appropriate for the course. There's some general guidelines that I think we could follow, you know, whether it's a 3-to-1 or whatever the ratio is there for, you know, teaching hours versus office hours. But my recommendation, I mean, I commend the work of the group and kind of saying this needs to be defined and then have that debate locally. If there is inequity, if, you know, RCOG requires 40 hours of office hours a week and COE requires 90 or vice versa, then let's have that conversation and implement it at a local level.
So I'll just clarify that this is the change. This one sentence essentially is the change that there is nothing in here that the Rules Committee is proposing that defines what the policy is. This simply says that units shall define their own policy. So individual units can have, this is the provost that can have those. This is strictly, this is what we're moving from, this is the proposed removal to. There's, if you don't see it here, then it's not getting changed.
Yeah, and it was inferred before that academic units had some standard, but there's no, yeah.
There was a question.
Does this apply to both part-time and full-time faculty?
If you're an instructor, yes, I mean, yeah, I'm teaching any course, you would have office hours. That's I would say that's my assumption.
We had one question here.
Just a quick question. Would this require the units to different colleges, for example, have different kinds of policies that they've written and established, like policy handbooks of their own colleges? At least that's what I still think is happening, right? And
Yes.
And do they then also have to establish that in their own policy manuals, rather than just on the course's syllabus? Because it says here, academic must establish a policy regarding office hours, faculty in turn must establish, but it doesn't say that the academic units have to actually then also communicate them in the policy manuals or whatever.
I understand your question. Yeah, we don't say how it's established, we don't say where it's written.
It's just a,
That's a good question.
yeah.
Jeff, that's
Yeah, that just goes to my comment. When you say academic units must establish, it leaves it open to a dean just dictating or to a process of faculty governance. So do we want as a body to say something more like using existing faculty governance processes, academic units must establish, so that it does work through those different governing bodies within each unit? Correct. So it's a suggestion to make sure that faculty are engaged in that process that ultimately results in the policy.
Thank you.
is that from the amendment
I
qualifying?
was going to say, if someone wants to change language, all you need to do is you need to move to make an amendment to
I'm
either.
a senator, so.
So any senator can make an amendment. All you need to do is say that you'd like to move to insert, delete, change language, and then say what language you'd like to.
Well, I would like to move to make a friendly amendment to add Jeff's language. I like that language.
Thanks, my friend.
I think that also will help with the nuance of part-time faculty, because my concern is we have a lot of part-time faculty that teach in the music department, and not all of them necessarily have an office. Or they might share an office. And so how are they exactly going to have a certain concrete number of office hours if there's not an office for them to use for it? So I think having some sort of nuance like that, like, okay, the faculty governing body is going to decide that for their department, because then they can take those things into consideration. Hey, we know we have so many faculty teaching these like individual lessons or smaller classes. Where are they going to have these office hours? How are we going to distinguish that and provide that? So I think that really helps kind of with where I was going. How are we going to make that work for full-time, part-time, maybe if they don't have an office?
So what we'll need for the minutes is we'll just need the specific language that you want to add, you know, and where you want to add it.
So what Jeff just said is using existing faculty governance policies, comma.
Yep.
Lowercase.
Processes, I think it was. Maybe.
So using
yeah,
existing faculty governance processes.
And then and academic units must establish a policy. And does that conform with that?
I was writing more or less what he had said, and I felt like what being proposed. So
okay. So what we would need at that time is we would need a second for that amendment.
Yep.
Second.
Okay. And then the amendment can go to the vote.
Okay, we do have a question.
Yeah, one question. The use of the term is because of the need for on-campus office hours versus like student hours. If the goal is to, you know, tie courses and work with students and student success and those sorts of things. Was there a discussion about the name of the policy, whether office hours, student hours, or anything else?
That's a good question. And I noticed you said something about on campus or something like that. There's nothing in here that's demanding an on campus presence. The goal is just towards student success and increased communication. We did receive suggestions about potentially calling it something like student engagement hours. Office hours are also for when colleagues can communicate with you. So we didn't propose any changes to that, but that has come up. And that's a good question.
So just as an observer of what the rules committee has done, I'll just add a little bit of context here, because in Marion's defense, she's being very gracious and filling in for Gavin right now. A lot of this did come up in the dialogue that the rules committee had, and just from observing that conversation, a lot of what that boiled down to was the policies particulars would be determined by the unit. So if the units wanted to factor in some nuances like that, on campus modality, student language, they could. If units wanted to factor in part-time, full-time, they could. So a lot of this boils down to, this is not proposing what the policy is, just that there should be a policy. So that's my observation of it. So we have the second, we can.
Yeah, so you have a second, so this would be the vote on just the amendment, not a vote on the entire policy.
So further discussion on the amendment, or should we take a vote for the friendly amendment to add a preface before this sentence? All right, so let's go ahead and call that question. So now we're voting on the friendly amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Okay. So with that amendment in mind, is there any final discussion on the issue, or shall we call the question on the policy as amended? All right, so we'll go ahead and call the question on this policy as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? All right, thank you all. All right. All right, old business. So shall we move ahead with, of course, Evelyn? Oh, thank you. All right, so there are some questions that we've raised in here over the past few months about funding and federal issues. So Board has been gracious enough to come visit us. So I'll go ahead and pull your slide up.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us to the meeting. Several faculty have reached out to our office and forwarded emails regarding the reorganization of the federal research infrastructure. And we realize that this brings a significant level of uncertainty, and we are monitoring the situation daily. We are monitoring policy that's coming out, executive order, any restraining orders that are resulting from from a lot of grant terminations. Meanwhile, we're continuing to share funding opportunities, support grants submissions. Currently, we are over 60% in each of our annual goals. We have 32 submissions totaling nearly $12 million that are pending a funding decision, 6 of which are federal applications that are between $500,000 and $1.7 million. While we may experience a delay in some of the federal decisions, we are continuing to actively spend down existing awards, especially those that are at the federal level and are at the greatest risk of grant termination. To date, we have experienced 2 grant terminations. The first termination was Department of State, which occurred early in the implementation phase and prior to the execution of the larger project components. We were informed just yesterday of the termination of an IMLS grant. Fortunately, thanks to our pre-award specialist, Erica Moore, we were able to completely spend down that grant. So while it's really disappointing, our current grant loss is sitting just below $200,000. As of yesterday, there were 9,283 federal grant terminations, totaling $33 billion. Yeah, it's staggering and it's frightening. Monday, there was a temporary restraining order that halted that termination for $11 billion in NIH grants. The state of Georgia was not part of that restraining order. But so we're monitoring that situation every single day. Right now, the majority of those grant terminations are falling within, which was completely expected, the Department of State, USAID, HHS, International Assistance Programs, the Department of Education, HUD, and the Department of Agriculture. There is a link on this slide that you're welcome to that will take you to that information. And yes, we are listed on that website. Additionally, we were engaged in a desk audit by a state agency that is providing us a federal pass-through grant funding. And we suspect that we'll encounter more of this type of activity as federal grants are continued to be scrutinized. We're thankful to our partners in business and finance and their assistance and expertise during these desk audits. They've provided critical documentation and they continue to support our efforts. We have experienced and do anticipate additional changes to federal funding opportunities. For example, the Department of Justice suspended all funding opportunities in February and March. Ultimately, that particular department, that agency, could have an impact on our existing programs like VOCA, because we do receive a pass-through grant from a state agency that is funded through the Department of Justice. But fortunately, we are not seeing this pause in NSF. In a letter on March 11th, the NSF director stated the agency would continue to advance the scientific enterprise. Although we do expect there will be changes in priority, and especially in areas of like STEM education for underrepresented populations. What we are doing to help mitigate at UWG include we're going to continue seeking funding opportunities from federal, state, and private agencies. We'll support all grant submissions and provide resources to help faculty navigate through these changes. One resource, which is also linked in this slide that I want to point you to, is the 2025 Federal Grant Writing Guide. It provides narrative strategies to navigate political scrutiny while remaining responsive to specific requirements of the federal guidance and ensuring the best interest of our students remains a priority. That's to say we still have to employ outcomes-based language in response to federal grant requests to preserve access to those most at risk. We will update our main department website page daily with any updated information. Please look there, reach out to us, email us, stop by. We're here for any questions, concerns, any guidance. Just let us know what we can do to help. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, so pick up where we left off last month, and we'll give this as much time as it needs, but no more time than 27 minutes. So there is a lot of demand for us to find a better way to communicate with one another as faculty in more of a peer-to-peer fashion. So the point of reference for, I think, all of us is an easily accessible, open to all faculty listserv. From all of the conversations that I've had recently about this, and especially our conversations with our leaders about this, there are a lot of good reasons why we may want to think more of a 2025 and forward solution for something like that. And maybe not just try and get back something that we had previously because it's our comfort zone and it's what we know. So that's the starting point for this conversation. We have, all this, but maybe there's not an easy way for us to communicate them. And sometimes, more information is better. We have access to a calendar, we have access to the monthly newsletter, but sometimes it just, there's value in just Dylan shoots off an email and it's like everybody sees it and so on and so forth. So, but like I said, not an email, something else. My imagination is not I'm not a creative person, so I said email. Because my brain thinks that way. So if we need to go to smaller groups, so be it, but I don't really want to spend a lot of time. Or maybe is this a tech solution? I think we all recognize the need. So I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time there. We recognize that I've heard enough to recognize there is a need. Is this a tech solution? Is this, am I just completely wrong and we need to have the fight for a listserv to get that back? What are y'all's thoughts? Please.
So I have a question, unfortunately, for migrants. What is the current tool that student organizations are using to share event information with students?
Anybody more with more recent knowledge? Yeah.
There was an app, but I think it's changed a couple of times over the last 5 or 10 years. I don't know what we're using now. The reason I ask is that as someone who's had trouble getting the word out about, for example, lab events or opportunities on campus to students where they see events listed, ideally, students would have one place to go to find out about the events that are taking place on our campus. And then they would be able to pull from that one place to wherever they share social media. Rather than us chase them into every social media or every calendar that they could possibly see. I don't know what that is, that one thing, but if I were able as a lab director to interact with it directly without needing, for example, to pass something forward so that it gets onto a website 3 weeks later or 2 weeks or 1 week, depending on the workload, which is astronomical for website updates and event listings. And without having to go through a kind of a, you know, if I want to share a few images of an event that's upcoming, and I have a title or something, and I have or a brief description or something like this, it doesn't necessarily need to have sort of the layout that's outward facing of like a specific font that need to be checked by someone else, need to be checked by someone else, that need to be checked. That seems to me to be the biggest barrier to the quick announcements that could be shared between us as well, because if we're sharing in the same place the students are sharing, then there's really only one spot to go to look to see events. On the other hand of that, we do have the calendar system by all of our learning curves in Outlook, I'm sure are in various stages of grief. But we have the ability to make programmatic calendars and to have those be shared. For example, anthropology has the ability, of course, to make a calendar of the events that anthropology wants everyone, quote unquote, to know about, or only students to know about. At max, that would be 2 calendars. Those could be tapped by other units on campus that want to know about those events, or they could feed into a calendar of all of the outward facing calendars for each program. Obviously, I'm talking about our own calendars, just to be really clear. Think about an almost naked calendar of just the coolest events that our programs or units are doing that we want to be outward facing. UCM could pull from that. Other units on campus could pull from that really easily. And so to me, that seems to be the lowest common denominator that we have for our scheduling. But I also wanted to match that to somehow the student.
Yeah, so
so I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, okay. So I think I hear 2 things on that. And by the way, Dr. Preston was gracious enough intentionally to stay for this conversation. So anytime you have something to add, please give me the high sign. I'm hearing 2 things. I'm hearing whatever the students are using, maybe there's value in the faculty being plugged into that. And I'm also hearing calendar. They got to do something with this calendar situation a little bit more. But I want to I saw you had some other hands going up. Go for it.
I don't know that we can use it, but I think what we essentially want is a format that's like Discord. Every Discord people we need a Discord server for UWG, and then departments that you can opt into as a user, so we're not opted into necessarily everything. Students could also opt into those particular like subcategories in Discord, so you essentially have UWG as a Discord page. And then there are like, how old are we all here? Perfect. Okay, so then there are like chat rooms underneath it that you can go into, right? And then so.
Hey, oh.
And I'm all in. I can hear the dial-up in my head right now. But then we can opt into, now the difficulty here is obviously they would need very limited users, right? And we would need, if we're gonna open it up to discussion, we would need some moderators with some power to some degree, or a little bit of protection. Because what I think we don't want is the old listserv model where suddenly people were having an argument and we all had to watch it, right? Okay, because it's exhausting. But I think essentially that kind of Discord thing where I, you know, as a humanities person, I could kind of lump together my humanities things that I'm notified about and then tell my humanities students about them. It would be interesting, or like I could see the lab things that are happening, you know, and then I can kind of pop in at some kind of something that feels like free will, you know, so I'm not overwhelmed by that, but then students could find that too.
Can I respond?
Please.
I mean, I love where we're actually converging to a solution we've already got. So talk about calendars. We've got the ability to say, here's Baffle. Right? If you want to subscribe to that, then great. If not, not. So you could have 100 different calendars just for events. And again, crowdsource that. But maybe it's not Slack or Discord, but Teams actually allows this. So if you've been using Teams just as a video chat, it's actually got capability to create subgroups and working groups and discussion threads within. So you could have hierarchical discussion threads within Teams. Similar to sharing 100 calendars, there could be 100 different conversations in Teams and these team, where whoever wants in on that, or the school is there. I think the concern that was raised by legal was anything that's occurring in these is spoilable. So you've also got off UWG Facebook groups that, you know, if you want to have a private conversation, then that's ideal. But anything within Teams or Discord or Slack or whatever we come up with technologically is open records. And that, I just tossed that out. If you want a working group to dive into this, I think technologically, we've got a hierarchical and grouping like Discord, Slack, discussion board that you could categorize and from an events calendaring. If you look at that weekly AA newsletter, not only is it linking to the events calendar, but it links to the form that you can enter your own. That might be more cumbersome, but that I think should hopefully be more immediate. But if you really want to crowdsource this and not have the person approving, and we have some trust in doing this appropriately, the Baffle anthropology calendar could be there and people could subscribe or remove, turn on temporarily or permanently. Yes. You know, you're going to have a lot of colorful, you know, a lot of colors in your calendar, but that could be a great way of crowdsourcing events and not relying on UCM to approve and post. And then the discussion could be a Teams. I just tossed that out with the caveat that anything we do there is essentially public from a discovery perspective.
So the other, just real quick, this is like, it's on my mind. With these tools, I think some of the things I hear from my colleagues, and I know it applies to me, is like, I use the email example. My brain goes back to email because I know how to use it. With some of these newer tools, I don't think there's as much comfort level with them. So I think part of the conversation going forward would be how much space there is to do some training and some professional development around just using some of these basic things that like Teams and all that. So,
well, if there's value and people, you know, see, hey, we're trying to achieve this, then if the tech solution works, then IFE and ITS could provide how to.
So we have some so Katie, and then we'll go.
That clicked in like official email, and I know we're talking about faculty here, but then we tell the clinical faculty to share cell phone numbers in case I have to text. If the clinical cancel, it's like we can't, but that is a violation of our policies. Our policy is not keeping up with the technology.
Okay. That's awesome. Sal?
I think the thing that we need to back to be a little bit more old school, and by that I mean actually putting things on paper, having the ability to actually post it physically, paper on some kind of board, someplace where almost everyone essentially at some point or another comes through. And there are a couple of places on campus that are like that. What's our audience? Is our audience the students? Well, then I think just about everybody who's on campus are eventually in the cafeteria and these comments, you know. We have to have, in the past, I know that it was a no-no to post just about anything anywhere. I know that we could not do that, we have to ask permission to do that. I think what's wrong with having a bunch of, you know, announcements on doors all over the place? I don't necessarily see that on site. I think it's a sign that there's activity on campus, and I think we ought to be able to do it without having to ask permission for somebody to tell us that that doesn't look, you know, the right color of the wall. I think that's a simple solution that we could use. For faculty, I don't know if there is some place that is more centrally located, perhaps, for faculty, I don't know. But I think we might want to, there's so much technology. I mean, there's Teams, there is GroupMe, there's this, there's that, and not everybody's on it. I don't know, I just think that a simpler, more simpler solution could work.
Well, yeah, Jason?
I was just wondering, like, if the technology doesn't work for us, could we engage students and faculty in computer science to work with us to invent something? Like, you know, here's a challenge. We have a unique need, old school listserv won't do it, but what could you come up with? What could UWG students with faculty invent that would fit our needs and then maybe expand to fit other needs?
Well, we have screens all over campus, so yes, we could put paper, but if you've got a calendar and maybe there's a Teams thread that's for announcements, pull from that automatically. Put it on a ticker on the bottom of our screens. And I think one of the challenges we're expressing is the volume of events, which I love, exceeds our human capacity to process. Now, are you going to, the risk there is somebody going to post something that's offensive or, you know, inappropriate? You know, humanities faculty, help us out. Right? I mean, that's not saying you do that. I'm saying you do, but yeah.
Somebody
social sciences, but you know, having something where you take that down quickly. I mean, the same thing is true of paper, right? You can post something that's inappropriate on paper. But I love the idea of, you know, assigning this as an internship or a special project over summer. I mean, this is SRAP all over, right?
Yeah.
Jeff?
One additional challenge that I'm facing with AI Busters is we can put it in the newsletter and then people read it and then they forget. And by the time the Thursday or whatever rolls around, I would love to be able to send an email to faculty saying, hey, just a reminder, AI Busters is happening today, you know. That's a little different wrinkle on this, but people, passive calendars or even calendars that you're supposed to look at regularly are good, but some events warrant some reminding. So I don't know how we can do that through these technologies, or if we just need to have access to email more broadly.
Yeah, Marion?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was there to clarify the platform for students is called Presence, but the forward facing is called Wolf Connect, so it's Presence. But if you go to the Center for Student Involvement and Inclusion, you'll see Wolf Connect. And that's primarily though organized around student organizations. But they do have the ability within that to communicate with students, and I think students can communicate. So does it interact at all with other calendars? I don't know, but we can find out from some of that. We can find out.
Mary?
And then I'm just thinking, like, when I'm finishing teaching a class, I somehow have students who start walking in early from the next class. So there are students who are sitting in a classroom for 15 minutes, and most of the time they're obviously staring at their phones, but they do look forward for some of that time. And I'm curious if there's a way, obviously easier said than done, but if there's a way that certain hierarchy of events, not every single thing, not like the geoscience club meeting, but maybe like a university-wide or college school level event, if those could be like a banner on that big screen. And it would take some programming, obviously, because right now it's, when you know what it is, I don't see in the classroom when I'm not there. I think it's just like a blue screen or something before you log in. But if there was a way that there could be this sleep screen that is a weekly updated, so it requires time, but it would say, hey, all you do for the event, and then maybe from each college there's a box or something that's a QR code. I don't know, it's complicated, but there's that dead time where no one's talking at them and they could be thinking about something. And that'd be for students, but for faculty too. You walk in the room and you see the banner before you log in and you're like, oh right, there's this thing I wanted to look up. And
That's great.
I don't have.
No, I think that's a yeah, that's good. I want to get to more. So Beth.
I've got 3 thoughts. One is using Emma Possible for faculty conversation email thread. 2, how about using discussion boards in CourseDen for faculty? There is functionality in that software where you can subscribe to a particular thread and just receive notices that there's a new post on a thread. And I don't know if that is possible. 3, please do something with calendars in the library. We have a zillion Outlook calendars, and then there's the central campus calendar. And so if I have an event, I literally have to put it on like 8 calendars in order to get it to everywhere that the library wants it to be, and the university wants it to be, and everywhere else. That is ridiculous. There should be a way to categorize an event to let it know what calendars it then shows up on.
Yeah. So if I could be a little summative, I think I'm hearing 3 general areas. I'm definitely hearing calendar, like find some better way to calendars. I'm hearing we need a better way to elevate publicity publicly as much as so when we have something that we like, we just need to get as many eyes on this as possible, maybe a better way that we can be involved in doing that. And the third big thing I'm hearing is that I think there is a demand for some type of maybe a more informal platform to have ongoing conversations around. I think that's so maybe like, of course, then a discussion board being an analogous point there. So what I hear, those 3 general areas are things that we can move forward on trying to expand interest on. Mike, is that a correct interpretation so far? I know it's not a perfect summary, but so I think please.
Suggestion. So eCore has like a shell class that's just for eCore instructors.
Yeah.
We're all in there, right? And then there are discussion boards that are generic and some are by topic, and there's some by disciplines. And economics, none of us ever chat. We don't ever use it. But some of the ones, English, I feel like they use theirs a lot. So, I mean, that might be something, because then that shell, you could actually do a lot more than just let faculty have conversations with each other. It's a great place to deposit information that you want everyone to see.
Yeah. I mean, that certainly solves one of the barriers, which is, I think, is training on these tools. If we all know how to use CourseDen, if we have like an all faculty CourseDen that's just always there, that would be, I think that's a low lift that maybe we can explore or something like that. That solves some of these challenges. Okay, Martin?
I hate CourseDen and interfacing with it. I think it's poorly designed from a user perspective, especially how it's so designed for mobile. I think Microsoft Teams is a good solution just from the perspective, like, you know, I've been chatting with James Wood about the current budget situation through chats. It's very fast, it's easy. We can share documents, we can video chat through it. There's a lot of functionality. It's pretty powerful. If you haven't taken the time to look at it, I would recommend like spend an hour just going through it and playing with it.
So, okay, so if because there could be some investment involved here, if we're able to work whether through IFE, working with the provost office or IT, and we've got some training around whether it's a video or a workshop or some training around how to better use these things like Teams, which I'm sold, like a lot of people use Teams for a reason. I just not one of those people. So if we get some training, are you all going to go, right? That is always an important point. So do you think, as speaking on behalf of yourself and your colleagues, do you imagine that professional development around these tools that we already have available to us is something that we would consume.
Yes.
Are these hands for yes? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, depending on when they're offered, because so often it's when I'm teaching. But they'll offer something, but I can't go because I'm teaching a class. It's like 10 a.m. I have 10 a.m. every, almost every day. And so I think if they were offered at various times, or if there was a virtual option, or maybe it was recorded and you can go back. I've gone back and watched things that have been recorded because I haven't been able to attend because I'm teaching a class. But if it's happening during a day, I find it difficult to get there because of teaching.
There was some magical hour on Tuesday and Thursday.
Just a couple more quick comments. So, Corey.
My student researcher who needs to be able to have peers who are students sign up for her workshops in the lab. Her workshops offer 10 students per section, 30 minutes. She does 30 minutes after 30 minutes after 30 minutes. So I need to learn how to use booking, right? Microsoft Booking. Then the number of people, some of them are in the room who have had a calendar to try to figure out how to use this correctly because it has to interface with her calendar and it bumps into her calendar events and won't let it pass through, etc. If we can have someone from IP working with ITS or otherwise to make an event that gets recorded for each of these central sort of learning curves that we have now with Outlook, one for calendar at least, one for bookings, and one for teams. That's a lot of information in the hands of faculty that can be accessed just on their own schedule, like you said with the video, previous video.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear consensus coming in here is let's see how we can all be brought up to speed as efficiently as possible on the tools that we have available to us that can help us address some of these problems and then go from there. I think that's the really good productive starting place. All right, well, you giving us some homework then. Any final comments before we go ahead and wrap for? Please.
Or I should have mentioned this in my comments, but I just want to make sure everyone was aware about the changes for D2L Forstead and the archiving of this after 5 years. I'm going to be saying this multiple times. I've been in the AA newsletter for a while, but please look to that message. We've got from an archival perspective, we need to maintain records for 5 years. After that, any class that hasn't been offered materials rotating off are going to be eliminated out of D2L. There's a wonderful how-to document that's also linked in that notice that shows you how to pull that content in D2L and preserve it for yourself personally, whether it's for PNT or PTR or just you want to make sure you've got access to that. Just wanted to bring that to the attention of the faculty. We'll be announcing it multiple times, but didn't want to miss sharing that publicly with you.
Thank you. All right, thank you all so much for an awesome year, and hope everything finishes up well.
The danger is now introduce more people. So that's the next challenge. Maybe that's what example. Yeah.